Hello, welcome to the Pastor Mike Drop Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Housholder, and I'm joined by my co-host, Emily Langpaul.
Hello.
It's like I forgot my last name for a second.
It happens.
It does. Things happen.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes. We're excited, though. We've got a great topic today.
Yeah, we're in a really great series.
We are. We're asking 20 questions in 20 weeks. The kinds of questions that people ask about faith, about God, about church, and today specifically about worship.
Yeah, with us we have worship leaders Alyssa Conley, Perry Ross, and Isaac Rodriguez. Hello.
Hi, guys.
Hey.
Welcome, everybody. It's just cool to hang out with the band.
I
Isn't
know it.
Yeah.
It feels cool.
We don't usually get to hang out with the band.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not usually asked to hang out with the band
true.
here at church, you know.
It's true.
For our listeners who are joining us, some of you will recognize these folks if you're regulars at Hope. Others of you listen to this podcast from all over the world. So these are some of our worship leaders.
Yeah. Very talented in many ways. We are going to ask you about your start. What was the first instrument you started to play?
Well, this will break the ice. Mm-hmm. So you're musicians, all of you.
Yes.
How did it begin for you, Alyssa?
I played the piano first.
And now how many instruments do you play?
Like maybe 4-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, 4.
I started as a drummer early
Okay.
on. Like my mom would say I would beat on pots and pans in the kitchen. So she knew right away that it was going to be drums first. So that's my first love.
Any
for
other
sure.
drummers in the family, or you were like the first?
Not really. Maybe my cousin plays too, but
Yeah.
it was not in my immediate family, no.
And you've picked up more than just drums now, obviously.
Yes, I play piano and guitar, acoustic, started there, and then I can kind of play a little bit of electric and a little bit of bass and,
That's the
some
ish
odds
part.
and
That's the
some
ish.
odds and ends.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Sure. Interesting. Isaac, how about you?
Kind of same with Perry. When I was a kid and I was 1, 2 years old, my dad told me that I used to hit pans and cans and stuff like that. And back in the day, they used to sell like meal powder in those metal cans. And my dad make me like a drum kind of with the metal cans. And I used to hit him with rhythm, and he knew.
Wow.
My dad was a professional bass player in the 80s, 90s, so he knew. And then my first gift when I was like 3 years old was a drum set. So I fell in love with it. So.
And now you play a bunch of instruments, not just drums.
I will consider myself, besides drums, piano and percussion, guitar, not really. That's an instrument that I never pick, and my dad was not really happy with me.
Because he's a bass guitar player.
Yes, and phenomenal guitar player. So all the time when he was playing the guitar, he's like, "You want to learn?" And I'm like, "Nah, I don't want to learn guitar for some reason. I don't know."
Just give me my drums and my keys.
Yeah, and then when I
percussion.
was 6, my mom forced me to play keys, which I will always be grateful.
We're grateful that she
Yep.
did that
Yeah.
too.
Us
Same.
too.
Now, your mom's a pastor.
Yes.
Your parents are pastors,
Yep.
Perry. So you're both pastors' kids. Alyssa, your parents are not pastors,
No,
right?
they're not.
But is that part of it? So you started playing music as pastors' kids at your parents' church?
Yeah, that was the first place I ever played like the drum set live was at church, and then church camp. We sang, me and my brother and my sister, we sang a lot. I never really liked to sing. I never thought I would want to do that. And then, here we go.
Look at you now.
I
Look
get
at you
older.
now, yes, exactly.
So, but yeah, I was playing at church since I was, 5th grade, maybe even younger. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How cool.
So it really does come pretty naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah, standing up, leading worship. Isaac, you start young too, I'm sure.
Yes, it was funny because when I was 2 years old, I kind of I started actually playing at church when I was 3.
Whoa!
Wow.
And I didn't have a bench, so I didn't have a bench who would fit my size because I was really small. So my dad made me like a little bench that I could reach the pedal, the drums, and I mean, my mom tells me to the day that people come to church. And when they get in, they didn't see anyone in the drums, but the drums were playing.
Playing
And
themselves.
it's literally, and it's pictures of people oh my gosh, he's 3 years old and playing at church. So I just love it from the first minute. And my dad was somebody who's learn, and I don't know, it just came natural. It was a gift from God, and just played it since I was 3 years old at church, which is insane.
That is.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So you two are pastors' kids and started playing young. Alyssa, how about the singing part of it? the vocal. Was that a part of your musical approach from a very young age? Or
Yeah.
when did you start singing in front of people?
Yeah, like these guys, my first thing was not piano. My first instrument was my voice.
Yeah.
And I started singing in front of people when I was about the same time that they were playing drums for people.
Just a kid.
So, yeah, I was really little.
Wow.
Yeah.
This doesn't surprise me. Does it you, Emily?
No.
No.
But I'm also just picturing my 3-year-old like, ooh, I don't think we have those gifts.
Hey, we've all got different gifts.
Yes.
Yeah.
I happen to know you also played a lot of instruments, though.
Well, for very short amounts of time. Yeah. So,
Never mind that.
6 months of violin, 1 year of clarinet, and 6 years, mind you, of piano.
6 years.
But I once hated it so much I tried to break my own finger to get out of a recital.
Oh wow, that's hating it a lot.
Yeah, can't all love it.
No.
But
Yeah.
thankful for those that do.
In a way, I'm glad that you didn't, because we don't need everyone to lead music,
Right.
We need some people to lead church life.
Sure.
With the church too.
Sure.
Well, this leads us to our, now that everybody knows everybody, this leads to some questions. We got some questions, don't we,
Yes,
Emily?
we do. Here we go.
Okay, so, hey, why don't we just jump right in? Anybody got any questions?
Our first question, as a worship leader, what's your goal? What do you hope to see during worship when you stand before a congregation?
Perry, let's start with you.
Okay.
You've been doing this the longest here.
Doing
at
this a
Hope.
long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I think this is a question that you just have to approach with the right attitude and the right heart, because as a worship leader, you do want to see in your mind, what you see when you watch, videos, music videos, or, live services from other churches where everyone's just all in and hands up and, everything looks perfect. And that's just, I understand that sentiment of what's happening in that moment. But when you walk out week after week, I think you could walk out with that expectation and then be disappointed when it's not reaching that expectation. So I think what we've had to learn, and what I've learned over the years, is you can't really gauge by what you see what God is doing in the lives of people. And so, we have in our own, our own wish list of like, we'd like to see everyone singing and everyone's hands raised and everybody in this moment, but not everybody is there. And especially a church our size, we have so many different people from so many different backgrounds and walks of life, and this could be someone's first time in. And for me to get out there and judge what's happening in the hearts of people is really unfair.
It's not ours.
And being able to say, I'm going out there, I'm going to, worship God with all my heart, and I'm inviting everyone to join me, whatever that looks like for them. And I think that's my expectation, is for people to be invited and for God to draw people into his presence by what we're doing on stage.
Really glad you said that. There's a verse in Scripture that speaks to this, and just to paraphrase it, is people look at things on the surface. They look at outward appearances, but God sees our heart. And we can't always judge what's going on in somebody's heart just because it isn't being manifested in some sort of physical expression of worship. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I wanted to hit it now because, you talk about hands up, hands down, what are the visible signs people are into it? Right, but remember, God's looking deeper than that. That's outward stuff. There could be somebody who's not showing any emotion at all, who's experiencing God's Spirit in the deepest possible ways in that moment. They just happen to be stoic people, or they happen to be, just very reserved people. As the joke we say around here a lot is, the spirit is willing, but the flesh can be Lutheran. And so some people just aren't going to get there, and that's okay. We want to make sure, though, that we do everything we can to lead them to the place where God can get a hold of their heart.
Yeah. And I think that's
worship.
the other side of the coin, is being, as worship leaders, we are helping people grow and instruct them on not like, what does true worship look like? I mean,
Right.
true worship looks like what it is, but biblically there are some things that we do when it comes to raising hands. Why do we do it? So we have to put
Right.
the why behind what it is that we're doing corporately.
Yeah, while we're on that subject of hands, let's put that out there, because there's the people who hear what I just said and get way too comfortable with it. They say, "Oh, yeah, see, so that
I don't
gives
have
me,
to."
yeah, I don't have to. I'll just keep my hands in my pockets. I don't need to sing. I don't need to. Need to? You're right. You don't need to do anything. Get to is another thing, and the Bible talks about hands up in the air as a natural posture of worship. It doesn't. It's not a Pentecostal thing or a charismatic thing or Lutheran or Presbyterian. It's not that at all. It's a biblical thing. In the same way that a lot of times those of us who are sports fans go to a game, like you, Emily, and you get really excited about your team winning, and you can't keep your hands in your pockets in that moment. You're up, yeah, go team. That's why it's a part of our natural posture of worship too. The other part of that question, though, is what's your goal? What would you say to that, Alyssa? What is the goal you have in mind when you lead worship?
Yeah. For me, this has two parts. One, I need to be worshiping. If I am not worshiping, I cannot lead a room of people or anybody, one person well. So there are moments, because I'm a human like all of you, where that starts to not, where I start to not be. I get distracted by the thing I heard or the person I see that's like, I don't know, leaving. I don't, you see everything in the room from up there.
Yeah, I wonder if they're sick. Are you okay?
Looking for where their family is.
Yeah.
Like, where is it?
So just, I need to be worshiping first. I cannot lead people if I am not doing it myself.
Man, that's so important. And it makes me follow up, and I'll ask you, Isaac, to bring you into this part of the conversation too. What is it about needing to be a worship leader who is worshiping too instead of performing? What's the difference between those?
For me, again, worship is a lifestyle, and God gave me a gift. And every time I get somebody to come to me and tell me, "Hey, you did amazing," I don't know how to take those compliments. For me, it's kind of more of like, I'm so happy and so grateful that God speak through me through my music. So it's kind of like I always understand that when I get up there, it's not about me, it's not about what I do, but it's about like, what can I do so I can preach people and God's message through music, if that makes sense.
It's what I love about our worship leaders at Hope, whether they're volunteers like you, Isaac, or staff like you guys, Perry and Alyssa, other staff, other volunteers who lead worship, that you do so. I mean, I don't mean to suggest that we are always 100% pure in everything we do.
We're not.
But I happen to know that you guys, I mean, your heart is in the right place when you worship. It is not a performance. It's not a concert. You're not putting on a show for people. You're leading people to the throne of God. You're inviting people into communion with God, into a connection with God. But God's given you guys gifts, and the way you take care of those gifts, God's given all of you gifts too, whether they're musical or something else. And here's the other thing about worship. It isn't just the music part of it either. You mentioned this, Isaac, and said, worship is a lifestyle. Yeah. I think that's such a key phrase. The thing that we do on Sunday morning with music, that part of worship just kind of comes out very naturally then out of the lifestyle. Instead of just, worship is that music thing we do on Sundays before the teaching. It's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. No, it's all worship. And Romans 12 would say, let everything you do be worship. Let the way you just live your life as sacrificial to God. That's your spiritual act of worship. So it goes beyond just music.
Yeah, we started down some of these right wrongs. So our next question is hands up or down, traditional or contemporary, online or in person, pews or chairs, dress up or come as you are.
Wow.
Go every week for how long? What is the right way to worship?
Yes.
I've always wanted to know.
Yes, the answer is
we
yes.
had the same answer.
You did.
Yes.
Say more about that, Alyssa. Yes, because.
Whatever your posture needs to be for you to show God that you adore God, that is your worship.
And I feel like that's kind of how we approach worship at Hope. We have what we call our Saturday Come As You Are service. I feel like every service is Come As You Are. Because
really
people come, we don't know what people are dealing with when they are on their way to church. Yeah. Kids in the minivan and, argument with your wife on the way to work. I wasn't speaking specifically about an instance. I said work, but I meant on the way to church. But
in general,
whoever it is. But just approaching, for me, it's all about a heart issue. Yes. It's not a matter of what happens on the outside. Now, are there things that can be distracting? Yes. We do have some rules about what people wear on stage when it comes to a worship team. But that's not a matter of whether it's, holy or not. It's just what's distracting or what's, keeping people from focusing on worshiping God. And so what can we do on our side of the stage to open up the space for people to enjoy God's presence?
Yeah, if we are distracting anybody from worship, we need to reevaluate what we are doing.
And that's
from
a
the
good
front.
reason to reevaluate it.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
That said, there's times where a gentle teaching moment is called for too.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody says, before worship, it should be silent in the room and it should be quiet and there shouldn't be any, because what they're saying, and I respect this, I truly do. What they're saying is that's my tradition. That's what I'm familiar with. That's my piety is another word for it. That's what I'm used to. And so I can't make the distinction between that piety and that tradition and what the Bible actually says about worship, because the Bible doesn't say when you come to worship, make sure you sit down for 20 minutes in silence before you start the service. That's tradition. And tradition can be great. And if that helps you in worship, then I would encourage you to do that before you come into the noisy room or find a quiet space. There's a lot of rooms around here people could find to have some quiet time before they come in, or do it at home before you come. Come in prayed up and ready to go. I think those things are really, really important. We say around here, it's one of the explanations to our core values, and that core value is we worship God, not tradition. We're not anti-tradition. Sometimes traditions can help us draw closer to God in worship and in faith. But where worship becomes a stumbling block, like you were speaking about there, Alyssa, we seek to tear that down unapologetically because the tradition isn't worth it. At one point in the scriptures, Jesus says, for the sake of tradition, you can make void the word of God. You can cancel out the main thing by thinking that it's about all these other things. Like, it's not really worship unless there's red carpet, down the aisle, or there's wooden pews, or stained glass, or there has to be 7 candles on each side of the altar. It's not really worship. And that, I get it. I respect it. But that's your piety and that's your tradition. And it isn't biblical.
And that's what Jesus said to the woman at the well. She's like, well, where should we worship? You say here, and our ancestors say here. And Jesus is like, you're missing it. Like, come to me and worship in spirit and in truth. And I think that's where we have to meet people, is in that place of where we're bringing them truth through what we're singing, and then allowing the Spirit to move them. That's where it happens. We can't draw boxes around it,
No, and if we take a deeper dive into John 4, we see that woman is trying to ask Jesus, well, what's the right way to worship? Which is really part of this question we're asking here. Tell me the right way and the right piety and the right tradition. And Jesus is saying that's not the point. It doesn't matter where, so much as where your heart is.
Sometimes traditions get so over everything, and that's something I discuss with my mom a lot. It's kind of like sometimes we let traditions to go over everything, and actually we let traditions to get over the way that all the things that God wants to do with the church.
Well said. So, what are some of the traditions around here, just as an example, and people in other churches might have other ones? There's nothing wrong with embracing those traditions if they're helping get the Jesus thing going. So, one of the traditions we have around here is the season of Lent, which actually helps people. It's not in the Bible. 40 days is, but it's not 40 days of Lent in the Bible. It's Jesus in the wilderness for 40 days and nights of rain. That number comes up. It's a holy number, but it's not 40 days of Lent in the Bible, and yet it's a good tradition for us, for this community, in this context. And as long as that gets the Jesus thing going around here, we're going to continue to embrace it. So can you think of any other traditions like that? Things that we do here at Hope, just as an example, in this church, that work well in this context, that seem to kind of keep coming back over and over again, and they're good things.
I just did a talk on the second line of the Lord's Prayer. I met a Hope, and I was saying in my talk that I didn't know the Lord's Prayer until I started working here.
Because different tradition.
I never
Christian
said it out loud.
Tradition,
I mean, it was a good year into this staff, me being on staff, that I had it memorized. I was looking at the screen the whole time. And so, like, saying the Lord's Prayer every week has been a powerful thing for me because it was a prayer that I had heard and dismissed for so long. And it wasn't anything that was wrong or right as far as my upbringing. It just wasn't a tradition that we did. But now that it's in a part of this service that we do, and now we do it regularly every week. We used to not do it every week, but now that we do it every week, there is something powerful that the congregation's saying it together and agreeing on those truths that are in there. I mean, every one of those lines is just so full of meaning and power. It can become something that is a little more rote and meaningless, but that's up to us to be able to internalize those words and make it a tradition that has meaning to it.
It's funny. I just thought of this as you were saying this. Lord's Prayer is a good tradition we have here. That's a good example. not saying the Lord's Prayer and worship and other traditions and pieties is also a tradition. That becomes something just as heavy as it's. Well, our tradition is we don't have tradition. Well, that's your tradition then. that you hold on to that. Everybody has something that they hold on to like that. One of the cool things I like about the way you guys approach this, and sort of the philosophy we've always had here in this particular church called Hope, is we're constantly willing to reevaluate those traditions and say, is this still working? Does this still draw people closer to Christ? Does it strengthen faith? Does it help the experience of the worshiper in the room? And, we're not going to be perfect at evaluating that all the time, and we have good-spirited debates about that sometimes. But we're open to it. We always want to ask, how could we do this better? What would allow us to raise the bar for the people who come here and worship here? I love that approach.
Next question. What's wrong with approaching worship as a spiritual consumer or turning worship into a show? Some could walk in and say it looks like a concert.
And that's something that I have talked to my mom a lot. And again,
your pastor mom. We need to add that again.
And because my mom is so bright, having a PhD in theology, is many things that I can talk to her like really deep. I don't need to go too far.
I've met her. She's brilliant. She's quite unbelievably insightful on all sorts of things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But something that I have thought during the years, and I have many people telling and saying that, like, oh, when you walk into Hope, for instance, it looks like a concert. But and that's something that I always gonna be grateful to my dad and say we always need to give the best of the best to God. But I also think if Jesus was here today, he would be using any tool to get his message expanded.
Yes.
And so if by instance, that means adding lights, adding a screen, adding cameras. I mean, Jesus preached for thousands of people without a mic. And how he preached it, and then people in the back were like, oh, Jesus, say this and say this. And they went back. But a lot of people just go like, oh, it looks like a concert. But for me, it's kind of when people says it looks like a concert, but then all of a sudden, any worship team or any worship band comes to town, and you're like, oh, let me go see them. Then
I'm going to go to the concert
and
at the
I'm going to go to the
State Fair
concert
to see the hair band, tribute.
So for me, it's always like, and I have this conversation with a lot of my friends. It's kind of like we need to give the best of the best to God. And what is that? Is the lights? Is the keyboard?
That's good.
What way we can expand the message to more people? Because and when people says no, it looks like yes, it does. But if Jesus would be here today, and if he had to preach, and he's here every day with us, but if he was present with us today and he has to preach for 10,000 people, of course he would add a mic, a big screen. I mean, we would have the best out of the best lights ever. So that's how I think it. It's like times change it, and in 10 years. Worship is going to be different. That is what it is today.
Absolutely.
So it's always going to keep growing. 10 years ago, and pray for, like, for example, for instance, can say it's not the same. And then he changed it. And then new keyboards and then new guitars and then new lights start coming. Now, as a church, it's either you stay or you adapt. And if you don't adapt, you disappear. And that's how the world works. Like if you don't adapt, little by little, you will start disappearing because other people will start adapting.
Yeah, God deserves our best.
Yes.
We have a responsibility as a church to give God everything that we've got, instead of just say, well, this is the way we've always done it, and so this is the way we have to continue to do it. There's also a danger, I think, in people looking for a church that it's going to be all about the show the way I like the show. I want it to be, so the consumer part of that. What's wrong with approaching worship as a consumer and saying, I don't like the song that they sang this week, so I'm not going to go anymore, or I'm gonna look for something else because I'm just consuming this. What would you say to that?
Worship is about being consumed by God, not consuming what you see or what's around you or what's happening on stage. It's about being consumed by the Spirit.
That's so good. The mic's dropped everywhere right there. That's already it.
I don't think I could sum it up any better. I mean, that's just it. Like if people are coming and, saying, well, it's not conducive for me to worship in this way. It would be like me going to a service where, you know, it doesn't have all the things that I'm used to, and saying, well, God can't speak to me through that. It's like I have to open myself up to be able to receive the message however it's being delivered to me.
Quick story. I'm a pastor's kid, and my dad moved from church to church in different states. And each of those churches had a little bit of a different tradition and piety, even though there was a lot of similarities, because they're all Lutheran churches. But when we moved to our church in Chicago, it was a little bit more of a high church, liturgical, meaning a little bit more pomp and circumstance, smells and bells, you know, a little bit more Roman Catholic type thing. I mean, it was the whole show. And, you know, acolytes would parade down the center aisle for the reading of the gospel, and a big, you know, altar cross that would be carried to lead the Bible down there. And then the pastor would come and read it. So a lot of formality. And at first I was like, this is wrong. This isn't, because what wrong was to me was what I'm not used to.
Yep.
Then I go to college, and somebody invites me to a service in a local church. That's my first experience with a Pentecostal kind of church worship moment. And I'm looking around, I'm seeing all these hands in the air, and I'm seeing people clapping, and I am not familiar with this. This is brand new stuff for the average Lutheran. And so my first reaction is, this is wrong. This is not the way you're supposed to worship. And that can go any direction. That can go any way. And if we approach it as consumers instead of being consumed by God, as you said so profoundly there, Alyssa, we're going to miss the whole point.
Yep.
What ended up happening was I went to the campus pastor at my college, and I was like, I went to this service on Sunday with my friends, and they had their hands in the air, and they're clapping and dancing around. And he goes, wasn't it awesome?
Yeah.
He goes, now that's not my preference. That's not my first choice. So, but I like to experience that. That changed me. Now I can go to Mass at a Roman Catholic church when I'm on vacation, and I'm digging it. I'm like, this is awesome. And it is, because God shows up in that environment too. I've worshiped at the Vatican before. It's just, it's the coolest thing. But it's also the coolest thing to worship with 2 or 3 people in a church that's the polar opposite of formality. It's the most informal thing that you've ever seen. I love it all, and it has really expanded my worship experience. But it's more than that. It's deepened my faith. It's strengthened me to realize that God can break through in ways that maybe aren't my top of the list first choice. This is the way I like to do it. And so kudos to you guys again too, because I know the way you approach it isn't always, what song do I like? Yep. You know, that's got to be tempting for worship leaders, right? Let's play the songs we like instead of the ones the congregation finds Jesus in. You know, it's almost like the band that's on tour is like, we have to sing this song again, you know, our hit song that everybody loves, but we can't stand it anymore. And you guys are always willing to sacrifice that, to say, let's do the stuff that gets the Jesus thing going in the room. I think that's huge.
Yeah, that's good. It's time to go into our deeper dive.
It is. Let's dive deep, put the scuba gear on, people, because this is the fun part. So if we have this freedom to worship in all these different ways, and if we're constantly going to be seeking the heart of God and to be consumed by God in worship, as you guys look ahead to the future, Isaac, you mentioned 10 years from now, worship will probably look different. And there's no way for sure that we know exactly what that's going to look like. But we're kind of riding some waves here lately, aren't we? Because worship, you can almost feel the power of the Holy Spirit moving. I felt that almost, I mean, every Saturday night for sure. It's just something about that Saturday night service, and oftentimes now on Sunday mornings as well. It's just God is breaking through and breaking through and breaking through in those worship moments. And people are, I mean, there's something going on here. Yeah, God is going on here. What is that? And what are you excited about? And what do we have to look forward to here as a church? I know we've got an event coming up, Isaac, that was sort of a dream that God laid on your heart.
Yeah, we have a worship night / live recording. That's something that I feel like God put in my heart. And I've been part of many, but not what it takes from zero to nothing. And I know that's something that Perry here, I don't know, how many years you have here?
15.
15, and Alyssa 8. Yeah. And many more people dream to have this worship team. Like, that's something that I know you guys more than me. I've been here for 3 years now, been dreaming. But I feel that's something that God put in my heart and put the ways like how this can work in the best way. And it's gonna be a night of true worship when we're just gonna sing and you as well will bring a show word. But I'm really looking forward what God is gonna do, and this is something groundbreaking, not only for Hope and not only for Iowa, but for the Midwest. And that's something that God put in my heart. It's kind of like a lot of my friends, and I've been really grateful during the years to create a lot of relationships with friends, musician friends all over the country, the world. And something that they ask me is like, where do you live again? And I'm like, in Iowa. And for many years, I have many big opportunities to leave the state and big music opportunities that they just came to me. And I'm like, I talked to my mom and I talked to many people. And something that God told me and put in my heart was like, you need to stay in Iowa. It's so easy for me to move to Nashville or move to Atlanta or move to LA and go there and play music. And it would be great. But what if, and that's something that got put in my heart as a goal, is like, what if you do something here and you groundbreak and you do something for the Midwest? Because a lot of people, when they think about the Midwest, music-wise, they will think about Minnesota, Chicago.
The bigger
and it's
cities,
not a mister from Kansas City, but nothing here. And like, why not here? If we have such a large congregation and God just put the vision on me, and how everything is just like orchestrating. It's just amazing to see everything now come into a reality. I mean, 3 weeks away. It's just something that, and I can't wait to do it again and again and again.
You know, when I think about all the people that God has brought together here musically, there's no doubt in my mind that He's up to something huge and big. You know, the prophets speak in the Old Testament and then again on the day of Pentecost about your young men and your young women dreaming and visioning and seeing things. And I feel like that's part of what you're bringing, Isaac. But Perry, it's not new. You've been here 15 years on staff and some time before that where you were just worshiping here, not on staff and as a volunteer and leading. We've been dreaming about this kind of stuff in different ways for a decade and a half at least. And it feels like here comes the wave, surfs up.
Yeah, I mean, we've had, other worship nights, and this one just kind of feels like there's different momentum behind it.
Yeah.
What's interesting is even today back in the office just a little bit ago, I was listening to some music from like 2004, 2006,
Nice.
like some of these songs that just kind of go, oh yeah, I forgot about that song. And,
The oldies, yeah.
But what's exciting about it is there's still great music being written now. Like it's not, and like you were saying earlier, we're not stuck in a decade of music. There's so many, and even more now. There's so many songwriters out there. There's so many churches that are birthing music from within, and I feel like that's what I'm excited about for us as Hope. Is we have started this songwriting, journey. We've got one that even you mentioned some of the lyrics from the song we just did this weekend that Hope Worship came from Hope Worship, and so we've got more coming. I feel like that's what I'm excited about, is just seeing us come together. We've got a great team. We got the people around that need to be around to kind of move this forward, and I'm excited about what is going to come in the next couple years, but even down the road, just what God's going to do through the songwriting here at Hope.
Yeah, it's not bragging if it's true, and the reality is, and so this is about you guys, not me. It's easier for me to say. You're too humble to say it. We have the best live musicians in Iowa right here at Lutheran Church of Hope. There's no doubt in my mind. God is bringing together the different pieces, so just the quality of the music is at a certain level, and now. Like you said, Perry, we've how long have we talked about? Well, we're going to start writing songs. We're going to start writing songs. We're going to start, now all of a sudden we're writing songs. We, meaning you all, our Hope Worship is writing songs, and they're, you sang one this past weekend at worship, and it's the song that we all went home singing. It was the one that was stuck in our minds. That's the litmus test. That's the one that God uses, and you stick with it. That's a powerful thing. And it's not us, it's God.
Yeah.
We're just along for the ride. We don't create the wave, we just surf it.
And it can't be that we're writing music because we want it to be popular.
Right.
Like we made it a very clear goal is we write music
Writing
for hope. Like
Yep.
we want these songs to mean something to us.
Yep.
And if if we were to write for the reason of like we want to make an album, we want it to
We
be
wanna be
number one,
famous.
right?
Yeah.
And then if we got there, it wouldn't mean anything, and we would probably fail anyway. But if we're doing it from saying we want to write music that hope grabs onto, that's where we're going to find that God can take it and do more than we can even think that He's going to do with it.
Yeah. So Alyssa, I know you're heavily involved in creating some of this new music and writing these songs. What is that process like? I think some of our listeners would be curious.
I would love for you to tell me because we are still trying to figure it out.
It just happens.
So COVID is terrible. We can all agree on that. But it gave our teams a lot of space to create together. That song was written during COVID to pair with one of the 10 for 10.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the
So-
vision, you mean?
Spirit-filled, I
God
think it
gave
was.
us.
Yeah.
We had the 10 for 10, and we said, let's all write a song for each one of those 10 for 10. And-
We didn't write that many, to be clear.
We
did our
tried.
best, and a lot of them were pretty terrible.
But it was just to
Thank
get
you for not bringing those out
Right.
to everybody.
we left those not
Yeah.
Back
available for anybody. But we've had some time, like even just in some recent songwriting sessions where we've dusted some of those off, and we've been like, okay, what can we do with these? And that's what happened with Pour Your Spirit Out, and we're really excited about it.
I'm too. Emily, I know you've been at all these worship nights. You and your husband are like, what you bring to worship isn't just 6 years of piano lessons back in the day. But you have you and your husband both have a passion for this. Want to see this happen at Hope. Tell me
Yeah.
more about that.
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity for the church. I think that it's important to recognize we do these things every weekend when we worship together.
Thank you for saying that. It's
Yeah,
not
we
just
do.
worship night. It's every Sunday, every
Yeah.
Saturday night, every Sunday night.
Yeah, but it's also good to, as a church or as a community, to pause and give God more of that space and to enter into it in a new way. And I think part of what we've talked about in this conversation is you have to let God use whatever means people are putting out. And so the fact that you guys are now creating your own stuff and you're inviting people into that now to worship in a new way, I think that's a good thing.
It's a very good thing. Well, I think this is the part of the podcast where we usually talk about our mic drop moments, but I think we can all agree there's a consensus. It's not approaching worship as consumers, but to be consumed by God, as Alyssa said. That was the moment, and I hope that you'll carry that out with you too as you get ready to worship wherever you live. Whatever church family that you're a part of, want to encourage you to do that, not as a consumer this weekend, but as a servant of Jesus Christ, as somebody who's coming in there as a part of the body of Christ and contributing what you bring, your gifts to it, and looking for the Spirit of Christ in the midst of those moments. I think that's a key that can unlock a lot of doors for us, and that is really happening. We've talked about how long we've waited for this wave to come of being able to write new songs, fresh music, and it's not just here at Hope; it's other ministries and churches are writing a lot of music these days. I think for a decade or so it was a little dry before that. I mean, it was really strong for a while, and then we went into the wilderness for a bit, where there's like, okay, well, this is okay, but it's not like that stuff that was coming out of last decade. I feel like we're coming back to that now.
And now
like,
it's almost too much. Like there's so much good music.
it's
and
like
we don't have time to do all these songs.
It's like getting to dessert and everything on the menu you want, right? But you can only have so much. Well, we've got, if not this week, next week. Like you said, Emily, it's not just the big events that we have for worship. It's what happens this weekend. So I invite you to join us for worship. And thank you guys. Thanks for being faithful leaders. Thanks for being good enough with your time to come on down to our humble basement studio and hang out with us for a while to talk about these things.
Should we tell them when the worship night is?
Yeah.
I don't know if we talked about the
date.
time.
Yeah,
the
we
date.
We should.
So it's Saturday, April 9th at 5 p.m.
Correct.
at Lutheran Church of Hope in West Des Moines.
That's it. Come wherever you are, whatever church you're part of, come and let's bring our hearts to God. It also happens to be, talking about good traditions, the eve of Holy Week.
Yeah.
And so that's the way we're going to kick off Palm Sunday the next day, and then all of our Holy Week services leading up to the celebration of Jesus' resurrection on Easter Sunday, which doesn't get better than that. So it's excited as I am for worship night. It all kind of just sets the table for the central story of our faith. He is risen. All right, I'm all fired up now. I feel like we should just break out. Like you said,
Get the
worship's a
tuba out.
lifestyle. Get the tuba. Start
Let's
playing.
worship.
Maybe instead of that, you guys go ahead and lead this week. I'll preach, and you guys go ahead and
Okay.
do what you do. Emily, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Alyssa, Perry,
Yeah.
Isaac, thank you guys. And thank all of you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time, and we'll see you at worship.
Thanks for joining us today. Please click like, share it with a friend, and subscribe so we can see you next time.